to Global Pay Fest 25. I'm Natalie Lloyd, I'm Customer Success Manager at JGA Recruitment, and I'll be your host for this session of our 24-hour tour through the world of global payroll. We're just over halfway through, and we're heading to the Netherlands, where we'll dive into one of Europe's most structured, but also surprisingly nuanced payroll systems. From tax treatment of expats to statutory benefits and selectoral collective agreements, the Dutch system is both complex and efficient. I am absolutely thrilled to be joined today by Hein Runderkamp. Hein is Benelux partner at Payroll Minds and brings a wealth of expertise in Dutch and regional payroll operations. He advises multinational organizations on how to navigate the intricate requirements of Benelux payroll compliance. Hein has over 30 years of experience with some impressive global organizations and is now leading the Benelux global payroll function at Payroll Minds, helping the world's leading brands design their global payroll processes, select strategic vendors, and build powerful teams. So Hein, thank you so much for being with us. Would you mind starting by telling our audience a little bit about yourself and your experience?
Yes, of course, Natalie. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a thrill to be a part of this great global payroll event. It's a really honor to us, and I was um, I was thrilled to tell you something about the Dutch payroll legislation, etc. Me myself, I was born as a payroll professional only 52 years ago, and now over more than 25 years of experience in HR and payroll. I always loved the payroll challenges and the tactical and strategic levels within. And my expertise now includes implementing and optimizing EHR and payroll software, managing outsourcing projects, advising on software selection in the Dutch market. And later on, I specialized in payroll process optimization, and now I'm at Payroll Minds, evolving that knowledge to payroll process innovation for the Benelux with great efforts in data migration and the payroll process optimization. That's the main goal of my division now. Innovating the payroll process by offering knowledge and offering tools that really matter because we are payroll minds, so we need to use our minds on payroll.
I love that. Thanks so much, Hein. It's like your experience has really evolved with the payroll. So you've kind of been there and seen the changes. And if anyone's ready to talk about the future and what's coming, it's going to be you. So for those of you who are just joining us, our Netherlands hour is going to cover three elements. So we'll start with Hein's expert overview of the Dutch payroll landscape. We'll look at recent regulatory updates and compliance considerations. Then we'll go through a case study which will go into problems that employers could face when expanding into the Netherlands. And we'll wrap things up with a Q&A which will address common challenges that global employers face in the Netherlands. So, Hein, let's begin with your expert overview of Dutch payroll.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm excited to walk you through some of the most important features of Dutch payroll. Whether you're hiring your first employee in the Netherlands or managing a larger team, well, this is one country where precision pays off. And there are some key elements in Dutch payroll. Of course, every country has its own subsidies or its own legislation on payroll. But in the Netherlands, there are some things that are really, really characteristic for the Netherlands. So let me take you through some of them. Like the first one, the collective labor agreements in the Netherlands, sector specific agreements that often define minimum wage levels, working hours, holiday entitlements, and notice periods. I will get back to that, to all these points later on. Then the second one is really important, the mandatory benefits by Dutch legislation, like obligation on paying holiday allowance, statutory sick leave, and parental leave matters. Those really are pieces of legislation that are really they grab into your payroll process, into your HR process. The hiring and onboarding process really are subject to specific legislation over here. The third one I want to talk about is the local contract compliance. like the mandatory contract types, flex contracts, fixed term, indefinite terms. It's heavily regulated by both national legislation and collective labor agreements. Then we have the monthly returns and year-end filing for both wage tax and pension premiums. Um, Specifically, the pension premiums do depend on collective labor agreements, and the way you file your return. That is really something in the Netherlands. You really need good automation and good software to do so, and maintain the software. Then we have the pension schemes on itself, often regulated by industry specific collective labor agreements or employer arrangements. And when that is not applicable, Dutch legislation will see to that. So there's always some form of pension scheme. And you have, of course, for expats, for the international payroll, the 30% ruling. And that is a tax facility allowing eligible foreign employees to receive 30% of their gross salary tax free. Those are the things I wanted to talk you through during this part of our conversation. So the collective labor agreement, what is that in the Netherlands? It is what the word said. It's a collective labor agreement, and it's an agreement on employment condition between employers or employer organization and trade unions. And the government can say, okay, this one is applicable for the entire sector, even if you're not part of the negotiations between the trade union and the employers, it's still applicable for you as an employer. Nowadays, there's also the possibility that employee organizations they have a collective labor agreement with the trade unions. So not only employers do that nowadays, it's also possible for the employee organizations to do that themselves. So even the employers can be put aside to that and still have to be part of the deal when the Dutch government says so. So the scope of these collective labor agreements, they apply to all employees in a company or in an entire sector. And the parties involved, as I said, are the unions, the employer associations, and of course the government. And the government can say that the CLA is legally binding. So it's universally for a total sector like transportation or healthcare or flex temporary labor. Um, so the last collective labor agreement on temporary labor is closed by employee organizations and not by the unions. That's something different. So, and the content. What is the content of a collective labor agreement? It covers everything. Everything you do want to be covered, everything you don't want to be covered, because you lose any freedom as an employee, as an employer. You really have to stick to the CLA. And the CLA, when it's better than the legislation, than general legislation, the CLA counts. So if you have, for example, 20 statutory holidays by Dutch legislation, and the CLA says no, it's 40, then you have to give your people 40 days off. So it's really important also for the cost, the employer's cost for the labor that the CLA foresees in uh, lower employee costs. And then the other side, of course, the employees who want the best out of everything. So the trick is to find balance within that. And in good economic times, the balance is always right. We never agree, we never argue about anything. But in bad times, we argue about everything. So collective labor agreements can end after 3 years, and new negotiations can take 2 more years to be finalized. So sometimes there is something like we call it like an interbellum between two collective labor agreements, when all things are just temporary and can be calculated afterwards with retroactive force. So when you have new salary scales in 2 years after um, the CLA is closed, then you get a retroactive force recalculations for 2 years for every employee in your company. And that also leads to great employers' costs. So sometimes it can lead to great problems when a collective labor agreement is just not agreed in time. And you see that all the time, not only in as I said, temporary labor, but also in healthcare. The government also has that a lot. So that is a tricky thing for payroll, because when you calculate payroll, you calculate your yearly statements, you make everything all right for your company, and then 2 years later you say, well, here we are. The wages are going up by 6% the year before last year. Well, there you go. So that is really something to take into account when you run a company and you run payroll, also international, that it's always possible your employer's cost can go through the roof even 2 years after the year is already closed. Really important. So, as I said, the ministry can declare a CLA universally binding, so you don't have to say anything about it. You just have to proceed with the rulings in the CLA, and that also counts for pension schemes involved. So, really important when you go to the Netherlands, when you are a foreign employer going to the Netherlands, you always have to think about, is there any collective labor agreement applied for me, because that can really ruin my costs, and it's not like, these are my costs for my employees. No, it's never sure, and it can always change afterwards. It's really important to take that into account. And it's also to be taken into the labor agreements you have with your employees. There's no escaping, so you really have to put it on writing that these are the rules you apply to. So that's for collective labor agreement. It's part one of doing business in the Netherlands. Check if there is a collective labor agreement. Then we also have the local contract compliance. There are some key elements in the Dutch legislation about employee contracts. So, as an example, you are obliged, or you are allowed, I must say, to have 3 temporary contracts in 3 years. And there are, of course, sectors where you don't want to give your employees fixed term contracts. You just don't know where the economy is going. You don't know what politics is doing, or international geographic politics can influence your company. So you don't want to give your employees always a fixed term of an indefinite term contract. But when you give your employee 3 fixed term contracts in a row, for example, 3 1-year contracts, then you are obliged to give your employee an indefinite term contract. The meaning of that is narrow the gap between permanent and flexible work, making permanent contracts more attractive for employers. But in the end, the employer just fires you after 3 temporary contracts because he doesn't want to give you an indefinite term. So, this kind of legislation does not always do what it's meant to do. And especially when you have a larger company with low rate labor, like in logistics, for example, great warehousing, where you have thousands of employees running around picking orders, you don't want to give them all an indefinite term contract. It's just not okay for you. But when you gave them 3, then you fire them. So the meaning of the legislation is that more people get indefinite term contracts, and the result of the legislation is that less people get indefinite term contracts, just because the legislation is not thinking about what it is to be an employer. And when you are an international employer, like for example AS Watson or the big ones, you have large warehouses over here or large data centers, and you always have to think first about, do I have a CLA to apply to? And do I have a local contract compliance that's applicable for me? And it's really something that also influences your employer costs. For example, when you got fired, you got a severance pay in the past. But now we call it a transition payment. And transition payment is a right for compensation when you let the employee go from day one, including during probation time. So when you have a month probation period and you say, well, it's just not going to work between us, then you already have to pay a transition payment, as they call it now, or a severance payment, as they call it in the early days. Um, that really makes your employer costs higher, even though it's not a big amount. But and so when you are an employee, well, it's you don't really care about the small amount. But when you have thousands of employees working for you with fixed contracts, you are constantly paying transition payment to leavers, and any joiner that comes to the company has the right to be paid a transition payment from day one. Then there are a lot of other things like dismissal grounds. There are applicable unemployment insurance premiums are lower when you give people an indefinite time contract. They are higher when you give them a fixed term contract. But you want to give fixed term contracts because of what I told you earlier. So your unemployment premium costs are sky high in the end. And that is also something that is not normal in international payroll. It's just what the Dutch government tries to achieve. It just doesn't work, and it's very expensive. Um, and we also have the difference between on-call contracts, payroll employees, permanent contracts. Um, every single form of contract has its own set of rules regarding social security premiums, sometimes wage tax rulings, for example, you only work holidays. Then you have another tax regime as when you work the entire year. There is constantly legislation grabbing into your payroll and into your payroll process, making it very difficult and very specific to process payroll. And it's also very it goes with some kind of flow. So you have to adapt your software nearly constantly to new legislation or new insights or new interpretation of legislation. And so it's just one point, local contract compliance, and I can talk about a year about it. So it's really something that matters. The third thing that's really important, it's kind of the same but then different. That's the mandatory benefits by Dutch legislation. There are of course always mandatory benefits, but in the Netherlands we are trying to make it impossible for foreign employers just to understand what's going on. Uh, like statutory sick leave. When you have an employee who is sick, you you must pay the employee 2 years of sick leave and at least 70% of the last earned wage. Um, and there comes in the collective labor agreement, because the collective labor agreement many times says no, you do not pay 2 years 70%, you pay 100% in year one and you pay 70% in year two. And the government says, That's a good idea, guys. So we'll make this applicable for the total sector. And there you are. Then you have a combination of mandatory benefits and a collective labor agreement. And then take the other one into account, the three temporary contracts. So it's like a mountain of legislation. It's always something together. So as I said, the statutory sick leave. So what does that mean? Can't I just fire the guy who is sick at home? No, you can't. Can I make arrangements to say, okay, we'll say goodbye to each other? No, you can't. What do I do with an employee who is ill? Um, I have some kind of a checklist for that. So you must notify the employer as soon as possible. I'm ill. That's one. Um, then the employer has to do a medical check and control, but he's not allowed to do it himself. So he has to hire a company, a doctor, to do so. Also for reasons of privacy, because literally you are not allowed to know what is the kind of illness. So when the employee calls you, I'm ill, and you say, oh, what do you have? Uh, I'm not telling you that because that's private. Okay, so I have an employee who's ill. I don't know what's going on, and then the everything is coming into place after that. You have a medical check. You have to do reintegration efforts, and there are a lot of things to do, a lot of plans to be made, and plans can be adjusted, a reintegration plan. And when you do not do that all right or within the given time periods, you get a fine. And those fines are sky high. So if you the entire process of guiding an employee who is ill is already very labor intensive. And if you do not keep to the timelines, it's also very costly. So what do? You take an insurance to cover these costs. That is one, because well, 2 years payment of an ill employee is very expensive if you only have 5 employees on the payroll, because someone has to be replaced. So that also makes you vulnerable for more than one sick employee. But the insurance premiums are also sky high. So there is really a thing to know when you are in the Netherlands and when you have employees in the Netherlands. Never, ever, ever let them get ill, because it might just pull down your entire company. If you're not well insured, if you're not well aware of the legislation about it, it really might cost you your company, and that is it, you wouldn't be the first one. So and that is just one part of a mandatory benefit. uh, when you look further, like for example a holiday allowance, every employer in the Netherlands is must pay 8% holiday allowance to the employee. And it's not about everything, not about non-taxable parts of the salary, but 8% of the gross annual salary and every gross part of the salary that you are fixed entitled to. So it always, when you say, okay, I give an employee a 50K gross salary, don't forget about the 8% that's coming up on that. And don't forget about the premiums that are also being calculated about the holiday allowance. And the holiday allowance is also taken into the illness payment you make. So that is something about a cumulative employer's costs it's really rising. So you should always think about that when you hire an employee, to just talk about a package. You don't say, okay, this is your gross monthly salary. No, this is your gross monthly package, including holiday allowance, including no everything else. because otherwise you're just not able to fix your costs. So that is something. You also have a holiday allowance during sick leave. Are you sick? Yes, you get a holiday allowance. And it also counts for statutory vacation days. That is for me for now. For the mandatory, that is enough. We still have the statutory parental leave issue in the Netherlands. We have about, well, and I just count from my screen over here, six forms of parental leave uh, for the mother. Of course, the maternity leave, that is normal. But you also have the first week when you're so happy to have a child delivered, also for the father or the partner, yeah, whatever you are. You also have additional birth leave for 5 weeks that is partially paid by the government, 70%. So when you're an employer, you say, okay, we have additional birth leave, it's 5 weeks, we pay you 70%. But you can already guess, there comes the collective labor agreement again, who says, no, 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 it's 90%, or sometimes, or in healthcare, or in government, or in IT also, I say 100%. Well, and that's just also the combination again between all those legislation that can really be a surprise for an international employer, because, well, we'll just start a company over here. Oh my goodness, someone gets pregnant. Oh my goodness, what is this? Um, and then you have the luck that when someone has been pregnant, got a baby, is healthy, gets back to your company, so you have your employee back. But of course, there can be something like the employee gets ill due to the pregnancy. That also leads to illness payment, and that is sometimes of mostly covered by the government, but to a maximum of, there we go, 70%. And there comes the collective labor agreement again and again and again. So I can really repeat myself all the time when it concerns legislation or employers' costs. Just always think about that in the Netherlands we have so much legislation which leads to so much higher labor costs as you would expect, and there's really something to manage, especially when you're a Dutch employer. You don't know better. This is just what it is. Being an employer uh, is not just about making money. It's also about making sure it's not a very expensive hobby. Just because you do not, people are not always able to see what are the real costs of employment, and the real costs of employment are very high in the Netherlands, and the risk you take for fines, etc., is so high. So you really need an ICP or a local provider to help you out, and local legislation specialist to help you out. We'll get back to that later. So we also have number four on the list, the monthly returns for wage tax, the year-end filing for wage tax, and of course the pension premiums. Um, the wage tax returns must be filed monthly using XML standards. Uh, that is now usually taken into the software. The real the well-known software houses, they all have that in their software. But this is the Netherlands. It's a tiny country, and it's a clumsy country sometimes, with sometimes clumsy payroll software, which just calculates from gross to net, and that's it. But it's just not possible anymore to do so, because not only the wage tax return must be filed via secure connection, It's also for the pension premiums that have their own XML output and their own connections with providers who take care of the pensions. There is really something. It's not easy for an employer to implement that in the software. So you really need mainstream software to foresee in that. So you can use SAP, of course, or in the Netherlands, it's mostly AFAS, as we say over here, and Visma software and SAP. Those big boys, they do have all that connections with the pension funds, but you have to implement it yourself. You have to put the right parameters on the right spot. You have to know what rulings do my people have. When you have a pension scheme in healthcare, you might have 5 or 6 different pension rulings per employee, and everything must be parameterized, everything must be put into the software, and everything must be audited and presented, and you need dashboards for that. So even when you have a small payroll, even when you have 4 or 5 people on the payroll, and you are subject to a collective labor agreement, or you are subject to just legislation, Dutch legislation, you really need great software to do so, and you really need good payroll consultancy to do so. The time when you were an employer, you took a piece of paper and wrote it down and sent it to the tax office. It's really way in the past. It's just so complex these days, and not only the content of payroll. So the gross to net and the premiums, or everything, like the 30% ruling, for example. The devil is now in the connections, in the interaction between different kinds of software. The best of breed discussion that is now back in town, of course, because everything integrates now, right now, via APIs, etc. But that also needs connections, and so it's not only about payroll anymore. It's about payroll processing and data migration, data conversion, and nowadays a tool for data migration and conversion is equally as important as the knowledge of the payroll you have. So that is something that it can just not be underestimated, and you really really need local knowledge to do so. And on a global level, we're just a tiny country, but when that tiny country is part of your global suite, then that it might be that the small country takes as much time for integration and data migration and conversion as the big US or the UK, or the large countries. And that's not something everybody counts on. Everybody thinks, oh, well, we have 2 Dutch guys over there. Let's just calculate and consolidate. No, thank you. We also need connections with the pension fund, with the tax office, with the social security board. We need everything. For those 2 people, yes, for those 2 people also. And it's just not possible to say, we'll fill out a form. No way. And that all comes just from a small a point of a wage tax return or a pension return. It's small, but in the end, for the data migration and conversion and the data moving from one side to the other, it's a big thing. Then we also have. I think you will tell me when my 18 minutes are gone for this part.
Bit over, but we'll definitely run through those best practices for multinationals just to make sure that everybody knows what they need to do.
Yeah. Well, the best practices, as I told you already, use a Dutch payroll provider or an in-country partner. It's just you cannot do without it. Not only the language, our beautiful Dutch language, is very complex. Luckily, We speak English, we speak Spanish, we speak French, and we speak anything you want. We are Dutch. We can do that. But when you look at the software, it's just not all translated into English. We have software where we can say, just push the UK button or the America button or the French button, forget it. The most things or the menu items are translated greatly, but how do you translate something like low cost labor shortage to your pension premium, or anything that's really small things, disablement gap insurances or disablement accident premiums, etc. So not everything is to be translated, and the legislation is so big on that. You really need a Dutch payroll partner to do so. And that not only for the content, as I told you already, also for the connections between the pension funds and the tax authorities. You really need a Dutch party to do so. Next best practice, track the CLA applicability. If there is a collective labor agreement applicable for you, check it. Because when you do not do so, or you think they'll never see it, they'll never notice, forget it. You need sector premium, sector codes. You just do not escape a collective labor agreement. And when you then underpay your people or give them not enough holidays or do not follow specific CLA regulation on illness, well, um, hell breaks loose on you. So track your CLA applicability, check your local contract compliance, and check your audit your tax-free allowances. In the Netherlands, the tax-free allowances are very limited, and they are really specified in legislation, and everything else is gross. So it's not just it's always possible to pay your people some tax-free things. Don't do so in the Netherlands because again, all hell breaks loose when you do so, and it's really costly. Not only the back payments you have to do or the retroactive force payments you have to do, but also the fines you have to pay on it. So the best practice, as I always say, start with the CLA. Start with the contract compliance and the local legislation, because there is the devil is in the detail, and you have to know the details to just advise on your international client how to set up payroll. So
Thank
that's the best practice, and use Dutch payroll software in the Netherlands, and you can also use SAP, of course, to plug in on Dutch legislation. No problem at all. But you really have to know what is on the backside, where is the CLA, where is does the extra legislation lie, where your payroll software just not provides.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think there's definitely a lot to digest there, especially if you're looking at having employees who might be going off sick. I bet COVID was an absolute nightmare in the Netherlands. Um, we are going to go through our fictional case study now, where we'll be looking at a renewable energy startup who are expanding into the Dutch market. They've got a newly established office in Rotterdam. So I'm just going to show you the case study now, and then we are a little bit behind time, so we'll run through it relatively quickly. But I think putting some of those rules into a real life scenario will really help you to understand how to break them down. There we go. So Green Pulse have launched in Amsterdam, not Rotterdam, with 25 employees. They've got leave accruals, employment contract laws, obligatory being part of a collective labour agreement like we just discussed, and some monthly pension returns which have presented some complications. So I will just run us through those challenges that they're facing and also how they could resolve this situation, please.
Yes, in this company, um, well, there are four things that it happens all the time. So in Netherlands, you have about 20 statutory vacation days, and well, nearly all the time the employer gives you extra days. So we get 5 days above the statutory days. But you really have to not to mix those days because the statutory days only last for 1 year and a half. The non-statutory days last for 5 years. That is one thing. So you first have to consume your statutory days because when you don't consume them within the year and a half, they're gone. So after June 30th of 2026, all your 2025 statutory days are gone if you did not consume them. Um, Also, you can sell your non-statutory days to your employer, back to your employer, in exchange for money or a bike scheme or anything you love. There's always individual budget that can be filled with the money value of the non-statutory days, but the statutory days are statutory days. So many times when you see, especially international employers, they say, okay, 25 days, and after 2 years, someone said, yeah, but where are my days? Yeah, they're gone. Because the statutory days are gone. Oh, no problem. We just pay them anyway. It's not allowed to pay them. The only way to pay out statutory days is when your labor agreement ends. So when you leave service, not before that. And why is that? To protect the employee from only being paid and not being able to have a holiday. So there's really something important in labor law over there. Uh, but many times the vacation days are just mismanaged and put in in one pot or in one place. So that's the first thing to do. Make sure that you first consume your statutory and then your non-statutory days. Second thing was the mismanagement of the balanced labor market. As I told you before, the three fixed-term contracts you are allowed to offer your employees. Um, Sometimes they say, okay, let's start with a 3 month contract. Okay. And another one, and another one, and another one. Oh, but this is the fourth fixed term. Yeah, but it's only a year. No, it's the fourth fixed term. You are now in fixed service. You have now an indefinite time contract. And the employer says, how could I know? You could have known. You should have known because that is legislation. And when you just don't do that, you have all indefinite time contracts. It also means when you have a temp, you hired a temp, it also counts in the chain of contracts. So when you say, well, I call VDR or whoever it is, I have a temp for 3 months, that's contract one. And when you take that person into service from a certain date, that's contract two already. And there are sectors in the Netherlands, like education, where you have temporary contracts for 1 day. There are some rulings to take care of that. Those are exceptional. Normally, just always think about that a fixed term contract is a fixed term contract, even if it is for a day or a week or a fortnight, anything. So in this company, um, there is really the people just didn't know. So after a while, you all only have people with indefinite time contracts. And how do you manage that? Not. You have to fire them if you want to, and that is a costly thing in the Netherlands. Letting go people is not very easy. You need a permit to do so, um, because when you end a temporary contract, you only have to pay the transition fee. When you want to end an indefinite time contract, you need a permit from the judge. Or you have to agree with the employee to end the contract. And you know that is a costly thing to do because agreeing on leaving the company just costs you a lot of money. The third one, obligatory collective labor agreement. Again, we discussed that already. Did you apply to, for example, disablement premiums, disablement gap, as we call it in the Netherlands? We have 1 million rulings for everything and nothing in the Netherlands, and it's always taken into the collective labor agreements, from education fund, social fund, uh, um, new glasses for people, new hearing aids for people, shoes with steel noses. We got it. We love legislation, and we love little rules, and we love funding things. So that's when you are an employer and you say, okay, just give me an overview of my employee costs. That I have a spreadsheet with 40 rows. What is that? What is that? What is that? Yeah, that's for the classes. That's for the social fund. That's for the education for employees older than 62 but younger than 78. Oh, etc., etc. So again, collective labor agreement. Goodness, that is important. Um, the last thing, the non-compliant with the monthly pension return. It's not that easy to know the rules about that. So you really need experienced consultancy on that. If not, it is possible that the pension fund says, there's a mistake in your return. Everything goes back. At one person of the 2,000 you want to deliver me has the number of his house, or the street is not okay, or his social security number is not okay. All 2,000 employees go back, and it goes on and on and on. So many employers, they have 6 7 months of wage tax or pension tax returns to be filed again and again and again. And we get so much questions from clients that say, I'm just not able to file a simple pension return. Help us. And that is also a costly thing to do. When you are an employer from abroad, uh, please, please consider these kind of things way before you start your business over here. Because first starting a business and then apply to legislation, it will cost you a lot.
Well, it sounds like it can be very tricky and very expensive. So it's definitely worth getting to know the legislation, getting to learn about those collective labour agreements, and making sure that you have an expert to talk to, who knows the legislation inside out and can help you when you're expanding things in the Netherlands.
Yeah, and use good software. That is it. And it sounds now like the Netherlands is not a nice place to be. It's the best place to be. I can tell you that. But for an employer and his legislation, well, it's complex. It really is.
Well, but if you like spreadsheets and legislation, it sounds like the absolute best place to be.
Oh yeah, I love it.
So we have a few minutes left. So we're going to run through some questions time. So the first one is, can we include that 8% holiday allowance in a monthly salary rather than paying it in May?
Well, it is possible, but it's not usually allowed. First of all, for permanent long-term employees, it must be paid normally in May or June. There are also collective labor agreements that see to that, but it is possible. So the one thing you always have to take care of that it's clearly specified on the payslip. So when you say your gross salary includes your holiday allowance, uh, uh, that is not the right thing. You have to really specify gross salary, gross components, and then the holiday allowance on that. So it's also when you pay holidays for you have about 10.7% holidays obligatory. So when you are a flexible worker, you have your hourly wage, you have your holidays, and then you have the holiday allowance, not only to be calculated on your salary, but also to be calculated on the holidays. So those are also components where you pay holiday allowance to. But it is allowed to pay it separately, but you really have to do to specify it.
Yeah, being super, super transparent. Otherwise, they can still claim that 8% in May as well, can't they?
And they will, they're Dutch.
So what happens if an expat loses their 30% ruling eligibility mid-employment?
Well, it's very easy. The allowance will just return back to normal rates from that moment on. You don't lose your ruling. No, it's really simple. I love this question.
So are bonuses subject to different taxation in the Netherlands?
Yes and no. There are special tax rates. We call that irregular tax rate. Um, and they apply to one-time payments like a holiday allowance or sales bonuses or severance pay. Um, and it's a flat rate. There's just a table that says, okay, what did you earn last year? Oh, you earned 50K. Your flat rate is 49%, for example, on special issues. But that rate corresponds with the income tax rate you pay on top of your income. So it looks like you pay more, but in the end, you pay the same as on your normal salary. But in your normal salary, you have, for example, a tax-free amount that is taken into account. But that tax-free amount is, of course, gone when you just pay your own salary. The special rate comes on top of that. So people always say, "Well, I pay too much. I pay extra tax on on my special benefits." Well, it looks like that, but in the end, it's not like that. It's just the top bracket tax bracket in income tax you pay over that. So yes, it's a different taxation. No, in the end, you don't pay more tax on a bonus than you pay on your normal salary. But your normal salary is mostly also due to tax brackets. First bracket, second bracket, third bracket. But the special income always comes on top. So you always pay the highest tax bracket on that. So that's a yes and a no.
I
It's
like
kind
the,
of hard to explain sometimes.
I like the answers with the Dutch questions because it's always like, yes, but. Um,
Yes, but yeah, that's really Dutch.
uh, So we have had a question in about sick leave, which I think we covered quite well at the beginning. So we'll have a look at a question about travel reimbursements. Now, how are travel reimbursements taxed in the Netherlands?
Oh, that is an easy one because the government tells us what are travel costs. So by car, by bike, by train, etc. And they have just a price per kilometer that is tax free. For now, that is 23 cent per kilometer, and it doesn't for commuting. So and it doesn't matter if you use a car, a bike, or anything. 23 cent tax free. Above that, that is taxable. There are many employers that pay 30 cents per kilometer. So on the pay slip, you see 7 cents per kilometer taxable, 23 non taxable. For public transport, that's different. Public transport is paid fully tax free. if supported by tickets or declarations. So you really need your train ticket, or a taxi is also public transportation. A plane is public transportation. So when you go to do your work by plane, all you have to do is give your ticket to the employer, and then it's tax free. And anything else is taxable. But commuting or business trips also 23 cents per kilometer, and if it's public transportation, fully reimbursed tax free. That it, that having said, the company car is not a commuting or business trip. A company car is taxable as a salary in kind. And if you drive per year more than 500 kilometers privately, then you say, okay, mostly 22% of the value of the car is taken into the annual account. So when you have a 50,000 euro car, you pay 22% per year, and then divided by the monthly payment, for example.
Sure. Cool.
That is all about a travel reimbursement.
Super, thank you. And thank you so much for sharing your expertise, for breaking it down and making it so understandable for our viewers. I think, we've said it a couple of times, the Dutch payroll landscape is definitely one where your local knowledge makes all the difference, whether it's your CAOs, your CLAs, your sick leave policies, even managing expat benefits. It's definitely, well, I say one of those legislations. It seems like a lot of legislation that you need
It's
to
unlimited.
understand. So I think it's super important, like you said, Hein, to make sure that if you are expanding into the Netherlands, or if you're managing a payroll and you don't know that legislation yet, it's really important to speak to an expert who knows what they're talking about and can guide you in the best way possible. So definitely something to consider. And I think, Hein, you won't mind me saying, if anybody has any questions, to make sure they reach out to you, and make sure that you're putting the right practices in place to make sure that you're not going to incur any of those costly fees as well. And don't get sick. To everyone joining us today, thank you so much for being part of our Netherlands session. I think for me, it's definitely one of those ones where I've learned so much, and I'm really going to take that away and be able to kind of use that when, I work in the recruitment sector, so when we're putting people into payroll jobs, to make sure that they are really understanding all of those legislations as well. So thank you so much, Hein. Thank you everyone for joining us. I do hope that you're leaving with greater clarity and more confidence in managing your Dutch payrolls as well. So we've still got 11 sessions to go. We'll be covering a bit more of Europe before heading over to the Americas. If you are just tuning in, you can catch up on our previous sessions from the APAC and MENA regions on demand. And next, we will head to Germany. And I think that's another complex and fascinating payroll system. And we'll be joined by Julian Scherer from the International University and JGA's Freddie. So grab a coffee, stay tuned for everything you need to know about Germany's complex tax classes, which will include that new amendment in there as well. Hein, do you have any final thoughts before we sign off?
Well, I have a lot, but I really told you already so much. So I also say grab a coffee. And when you come to the Netherlands as an employer, just make sure you're not walking alone. Just always make sure you have a payroll consultant or ICP at your side, and take care of a lot of coffee, because you'll need it. And I was a great honor to be part of your event, and I really love to see what Germany will offer us. So I will looking forward to that also.
That is the end of our session. So we'll see you all in Germany. Bye.